Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education, and I'm your host, Andrew McCormick. For teachers that have been around a while, it's hard not to adopt a "this too shall pass" attitude when you know every 3 or 4 years your district or administrator is going to roll out a hot new educational strategy to adopt. Oh, and the acronyms. We love them, right? PBS, the 3 Rs, SLOs, SBG, PLCs, LBA, IPIT, AIW. I've got to confess, once during an exceptionally boring and irrelevant day of PD, I tried to see if the acronyms that our school was using would actually fill up every letter of the alphabet. I think I was only missing like an X and a Z. But, I don't see STEM, STEAM, and PBL this way. These aren't your run-of-the-mill acronyms. These guys are so big and so encompassing and honestly so fraught with fear and misunderstanding from the ranks of the art teachers out there that these acronyms aren't going anywhere. We've got to deal with them. So to help me wrap my brain around them and to share some really cool STEAMy ideas is my good friend Ryan.
Hi, this is Ryan McInry. I am the Osage High School, Middle School art teacher. Next year, I am going to be creative consultant with a 4-district-wide consortium to be focusing on STEAM curriculum.
So I want to hit on 2 very specific ideas. Number 1, why we should care about these new STEM, STEAM, and PBL acronyms anyway. And then number 2, what art teachers can do to be more inclusive of these new directions. And then finally, before I bring on Ryan, I'm going to surprise you a little bit with a curveball here. And I'm going to actually talk about why I think the whole STEM versus STEAM debate is actually kind of stupid. But more on that later.
STEM, STEAM, and PBL are the future of education. That's why we should care.
So here's why we should care. Now listen, I'm going to be frank with you. If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance a whole lot less. Now I know that's a bumper sticker somewhere, but it's true. As art teachers, we've got to stay informed of new educational movements that affect us, and we need to be proactive, and if we're not, we could easily allow ourselves to be downsized. This really is a matter of survival and advocacy. I think education is currently a little schizophrenic. We love our standardized tests and data and accountability, but at the same time, as a reaction to this, we are looking for more open-ended and creativity-focused things like 21st century skills and the National Core Art Standards. As schools are looking and thinking of curriculum less as an accumulation of skills and more about adopting mindsets and dispositions, I think that STEM and STEAM really ought to be at the forefront of this shift. The new cool educational currency is creativity. It's what everyone says they want, businesses, schools, parents, and we've got to focus on this. It's what we need to trade in, and it's what we need to give our students. Caring about STEM and STEAM means that we care about education, not just our survival as art teachers. STEM, STEAM, PBL, it's how all students learn. These acronyms are really the vehicles by which our students learn lots of different skills and lots of different students, not just your quote-unquote artsy types. All of our students practice creativity through STEAM and PBL. And art teachers really are the champions and defenders of creativity, so we have to be at the front lines of schools adopting STEM and STEAM strategies because it really is what we do so naturally. If we don't do it, who will? In adjusting to a more STEAM paradigm, we have to realize that we can't do the same lessons that we've done for years. And by the way, where did those lessons come from? Probably from a former teacher, or maybe they were legacy projects that were left over in the school when we got that job. The argument that we should do things because we've always done them that way, that holds no water with me. So a STEAMy PBL curriculum is going to look different. Students will think more like designers and less like artists. A focus is going to be put more on the design process. So not only will projects and student work look a little different, materials are going to look different as well. We use tools. We use math. Aesthetics might sometimes take a backseat to simple machines and physics and conversations about common denominators. I'm doing a scale sculpture project. I don't want anyone out there thinking I'm talking denominators all the time. And did I mention the power tools? That's like my favorite part of this. Sometimes I feel like my art classroom, it's like someone dropped a big old ball of glitter and awesomeness in a more traditional industrial tech classroom. And I really think that the students are benefiting from that sort of outlook. I wrote an AOE article a few months ago called A Case for Hoarding in the Classroom, where I mentioned some of the different types of new materials that I've been using for my more STEAM and choice-based curriculum. I've designed Hollywood special effects zombie heads. I've made cardboard arcade consoles a la, Chuck E. Cheese. I've made boats out of junk and functional cardboard armor. Not only have these STEAM projects been a lot of fun, but I know that it's shifted the focus from making beautiful, finished objects to take home to mom and dad to more of a process where students are building and talking through creative problem solving. They may sometimes be a little less glamorous to look at, but I know that my students learned way more in these design build projects than they used to learn with my more straight-laced value and perspective drawings. And I still do some of that stuff, but I need to do the bigger, messier, more chaotic STEAM projects to really make sure that education is sticking with all of my students. This brings me to my final point, why I think the STEM versus STEAM debate is actually kind of stupid. I used to really, really care about this whole thing. I was that annoying teacher that would come up to complete strangers on the street if I overheard them talking about STEM and correct them. You mean STEAM, right? Don't forget arts in the middle with the A. But then I realized the errors in my way. But before I get to that, I actually want to level a little critique of STEM. And here it is. It's nothing new. We've had science and math education in this country ever since we've had education in this country. Having a science or math curriculum doesn't mean you're teaching STEM. And I love STEM. I honestly think that I could have been an engineer if the chips had fallen differently, and I really don't think that there's much of a difference between artists and engineers. But having a math textbook and a math teacher does not a STEM program make. Actually, infusing arts into STEM is how STEM becomes cool and how it sticks and how it becomes memorable for kids. They need that creativity piece, and that's where art serves such an important function. But this is where I realize the big errors of my ways. Do we only cherish the things that we put in the new shiny acronym? What about PE? I love gym. What about English? What about social studies? Are those disciplines not important? If they are, and we need to add them to the acronym, we've got to go out and reprint the letterhead that said STEM on it, or maybe even the more progressive STEAM, into strampuses to incorporate all that stuff. And that just sounds awful. It sounds like a mythological creature or something. But just like the hobbits in Middle-earth, there is one acronym to rule them all. It's PBL. Project-based learning. Students learn by doing. Students would much rather do math than learn about it. Students would much rather do science than memorize science facts. Teachers in schools need to get out of the textbook and start learning by doing PBL. So again, I circle back to my belief that this is how all students learn best, and art teachers do this better than any other teachers out there. Hence, we are the most important people in the building. Kidding. Not really kidding. I am really happy to share that AOE has a new course that they just launched this spring. I think if you're really fascinated by this divide or the unifying forces in the whole STEM, STEAM, PBL debate, then the project-based art room is definitely a course that you'll want to check out. I just started teaching this course this May, and I love how it explores how best to run a makerspace, how to implement design thinking strategies, and how to really make arts integration work. So if you're ready to enhance your classroom's 4 C's, there I go with the acronyms again, critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, creativity, then definitely check out the Project-Based Art Room. It's a 3-credit course and it starts at the beginning of the month, so head on over to theartofed.com and sign up now, and maybe I will actually even be your instructor this summer. All right, so let's hear from Ryan and let's talk all things STEAM and PBL. Hey, Ryan, man. Hey, thanks for joining me. How you doing today?
I'm great. How are you, Andrew?
I'm doing good. So, Ryan, we've known each other for a bunch of years and through different jobs and different schools. And I've really always loved your unique approach to your curriculum. I love your cool projects that you do. So let's jump right into it. What sort of cool STEMmy, STEAMy, PBL type projects are you doing right now with your students?
Well, in the art room, everything is project-based learning. So, we really have a head start in this area. Right now, my eighth graders, for example, we are working with designs for social issues. They are actually creating documentaries in their English classes. So we are looking at documentary film covers, and we are looking at what sells an audience, what type of message, graphics, lettering, colors. How does that message in just one poster sell your movie, sell your documentary? We are also working in mixed media design, working with some recycling. I coach tennis, so I've got hundreds of tennis sleeves, the empty tubes that the tennis balls come in. So that was an interesting challenge to the students in my mixed media design class. Here's a tube. You've got to create a 3D sculpture inside of it. So,
Cool.
and how are you going to go about this? What sort of materials? So it wasn't just hand it to them and say, go, and here are your supplies. I actually have them, generate ideas. What are possibilities? What sort of materials will you need? That sort of thing, where it's the upfront thinking process behind it. So that's just a couple examples.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I feel like I could turn this into like 30 minutes of just me stealing cool ideas from you, because I like both of those a lot. But one of the things you mentioned, we're actually going to get to a little bit later, kind of working with other teachers a little bit, which sounds really interesting. But before we get to that, I kind of want to ask you if you think that there's a difference between kind of what we've traditionally thought of as a fine art, capital A art curriculum, and kind of what it sounds like you and I are doing, which is maybe a little bit more of a design curriculum. You think there's much difference there?
That's a great question. I don't know. I guess it's yes and no. Fine arts. When I hear that word fine arts, I'm thinking museum. I'm thinking walking around in a fine art museum and looking at something. I think what we're doing here with design curriculum is actually part of fine arts. It's just we're using design curriculum, which is basically this design process from what artists already do that are showcasing artists in museums. And we are taking that design process and we're applying it to much more than just saying, okay, at the end of this, you're going to create something that hangs on the wall. We're looking at something that says, at the end of this, what has this done? Is this project more than just something that hangs on this wall? Is this project interactive with other people? Does this project affect other people somehow? I think it's both worlds, really, and I hope I answered that as clear and muddy as possible. But it is, and I think as art teachers, we have to kind of find this balance, because there still is art for art's sake. But with the new approach to STEAM, PBL, we really need to look at, okay, how are we generating some of these ideas, and where are those ideas coming from that our students are working with?
Well, you brought up a really good point, which was actually my next question, the key word there is balance. So, some people might think that they're radically different. I think you and I both agree that they're really not that different. They're both kind of getting at the same. They're just different approaches to getting at the same thing, which is to make sure our students are building their creative capacity, problem solving, learning skills, communicating, that really 21st century type language. But how do you balance both of those? And have you ever felt like you've lost some of what you had when you used to be more of a quote unquote traditional art curriculum teacher? I mean, how do you balance it?
Well, I think a balance can be struck just by having students work in either a visual journal or a sketchbook. And really, on the art teacher side, being really demanding that before they do anything, they are sketching out ideas, that they are writing down thoughts. I think just part of that is the design process. Now, if they're creating maybe it's a painting class and they're thinking about this new canvas in front of them that's entirely blank, rather than just handing them the paints and say, okay, go for it, just paint what you feel. No,
Right.
it's, let's examine some things. Let's get some things written down on the sketches. What are some of your interests? What are some of your questions? And that's all part of the design process, is asking questions, thinking of some different problems that they'd like to tackle with this image, with this painting, or whatever it is. So I think that's a key component, is the design process is all about starting with questions. And I think for fine art, taking those questions and investigating and really understanding where you're going along this design process, I think the outcome is much more richer than just saying, well, I just did it because that's what I was feeling.
Right.
No, I did it because I kind of asked this question, and some of my interests took me along this journey, and this is where I ended up.
Or the worst student response that a teacher can hear is, why'd you do this? Well, you told me to.
Right,
I'm doing the project that you told me to do. I'm doing the artwork you told me to. And it's
right.
like, I've definitely heard that from time to time. And then I just feel like, man, I've really missed out on an integral part of the students developing their interests and their own sort of method at approaching this thing. Ryan, we're only a handful of minutes into our interview, and I already know this is going so well because I want to ditch all my questions I kind of thought I was going to ask you and ask you all sorts of other ones. Like you brought up some good things. So one of the things you keep referencing is the design process, whether it's in painting or something that sounds like maybe more of a graphic design or illustration class. We have all these words: STEM, STEAM, PBL, design thinking, design curriculum, design process. Does that vernacular verbiage ever get like muddy for you? Do you really get hung up on it? Do you care? Or is it just like, this is kind of what I do, call it whatever the heck you want to call it?
Yeah, the latter there.
Okay.
I like I said, getting the students to start thinking before they just jump into anything. And kind of, I'm going to just go back to where you had just mentioned, the student that says to the teacher, "Well, I did this because that's what you want me to do." That's a tough area too, because we don't want to just give them, we don't want to front load something so much that they're just following the directions as is, and then just creating a product. And but at the same time, we don't want to. It's hard because a lot of our students yet they're not used to open-endedness.
Right.
Regular curriculum in other classrooms, there is just a procedure. Okay, here's the information. This is what I'm expecting of you, and then you go ahead and do this. Your math classes, and any other classes. I think sometimes that's how students are feeling, and when they get into the art room and you say, well, here's what I want you to do. You got to ask a series of, come up with 5 questions, and then we're going to talk in 15 minutes. And they just kind of look at you blank, like, questions about what? And it's too open-ended. And so it's that thinking part of it, the beginning of design process, is very, very tough for some of our students that are just starting into all of this PBL that's going on in the schools.
Right.
But I think it's something that, as more and more teachers are working with it in other classrooms, I think they're really going to get a handle of what we're asking for them. That it's not just about, okay, here's something, do it, turn it in. This is a big project, and what's the big idea behind it. So I think I backtracked. I don't even think I answered your
No, but
second.
this is all good stuff. We're just kind of making little circles here,
Sure.
but we keep progressing, which I like. One of the things I know we kind of feel the same about this is, why I think teachers would want to do this is, I think it's a more inclusive approach than what you kind of said early on with the fine arts, capital A arts. Like, it's this beautiful thing I hung on the wall, and it communicates.
Mm-hmm.
And that's great if we feel like we're training or preparing all of our kids to do that in the future. But I think a more design, STEM, STEAM, PBL curriculum is preparing lots of different types of people for lots of different types of avenues and professions. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. I think the more we read about this, the more education PBL that is being put out there. You're hearing from the industry, whether it's the startup world that's out there now. Creativity is so important, and it's not just creativity for a person can draw really well. It's that thinking side of creativity.
Yeah.
It's the problem solving. It's people that can work in a team and come up with solutions. And I think that's where the art teacher. That's why it's so exciting right now. Is because we've always been working in creativity. We've always been working in areas that, hey, how can we come up with a visual solution to this problem? But now we're that side of creativity of how can we think differently. I think that's really important, and then it applies to everything. It applies to your English, your science, your mathematics, your everywhere. So I guess that's what makes me excited about it. It's this idea of creativity is getting brought forward, and creative thinking is being brought forward. And it's not just about making pictures, but it's about how can we think outside the box.
Well, and you've alluded a couple times now to kind of rubbing up against and rubbing off on other teachers, whether it was that project you mentioned where they were kind of making documentary covers because they were doing that in English, or even all of the other teachers who are kind of like finally getting wind that like, man, PBL is the way to go. Let's not just learn about science. Let's do science. Let's not learn about math, but let's apply math. So I kind of want to ask you, does your more STEAM and design thinking PBL curriculum, does that push you to start collaborating with other teachers in your building, or are you just hunkering down and like going it on your own?
I guess because everything is so new, I really feel like a Han Solo in a way.
Well, now be careful. Be careful. You know what happens at the end. No spoilers here. But
well, let me just finish here. I will find out what others are doing, like the English project for the 8th graders. I know that our English teacher is really excited about PBL, and just by chance, just figuring out what students have been talking about, and then just walking into the library and discovering some of his students working on the documentaries, doing some of the filming, I just started emailing back and forth and said, hey, I think this would be a good fit. While they're creating documentaries in the art room, they could be working on. We can be looking at design aspects of the film cover. Or not every English class is doing this. Some English classes are doing social issues, so they're creating a poster. So we're actually looking at, okay, how can we get our issue? How can we get our message? On a visual scale out there for people to recognize and say, hey, I want to watch that, or hey, I want to look into more about what this website is. So in a way, I think a lot of the teachers are still kind of in a solo process of it. But I think more and more districts are really wanting teachers to do that collaboration. I think it's just a matter of finding the right fit with the right teachers that are willing to try this, because for some of them, it's stepping outside of their comfort zone and trying PBL. And it's schedule wise. We don't always have the same students at the same times either. But I think it's going to be more collaborative, and I think that's really what is going to make it for the students is realizing that, hey, this project is more than just this class, this hour. We're working on this side of it in English class, 5th hour. We're working on it this side during art class, 6th hour. So there's that sort of collaboration that's going on.
I think we would both agree that like when that happens, when it finally hits and everyone's doing it and the students are seeing the connections and the teachers are collaborating, this would definitely benefit all the curriculum of your school and the environment and the learning atmosphere and everything. I wonder what you think about, do you feel like that art teachers are the natural leaders of this sort of PBL, STEAM, design thinking initiative?
I definitely feel that art teachers should be part of this. If PBL is entering the school system, they need to step in, volunteer. They need to get their foot in the door with this type of education, and not just hang in the background. I really do feel that the art teachers should be part of this. In a way, we're the creative consultants. rather than, a science project that's just put on a poster board or something, we're trying to push them to the next level with it. And, art teachers, we just have a sense of design of what is visually appealing. And we can really take some of their projects and work with the science teacher, work with the students, and try to create something that really gets the project noticed, gets the kids more invested in it, makes them a little bit more excited about it. Maybe they're working with computer animation or something. Maybe they're working with some sort of form of new technology, and it's exciting. So I think art teachers should be there. Definitely should be there. I wouldn't say that. I guess I wouldn't say necessarily the leader. If you can hop in there and become the leader of it, certainly. But as art teachers, most art teachers are pretty scrambled with some of their other classrooms going as well. But I don't think that they should stay in reserves about it. And if they have an opportunity to lead with it, then definitely. Right. If their administrators or schools wanting them to go that way, I think they should definitely embrace it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe leader is too tough a word, but I mean, like, we got to be at the table, this is what we do. This is what we eat, breathe, and sleep as PBL. Like, we do it better than anyone else. Like, I like what you said. Like, we really should be the consultant. So let's wrap up on that note of being a consultant. And I'm going to ask you, for kind of our listeners out there, there's a new teacher who's really intrigued with STEAM, and the school is pushing STEM, and they want to kind of show how the arts kind of do that and do it better. Do you have maybe one or two specific strategies for someone out there who wants to get a more STEAMy PBL curriculum going?
I guess strategy-wise, as I don't know if I could call it a strategy. I would say for that teacher who really wants to get things going, it's just a matter of being flexible and being willing to communicate and start talking to other teachers and finding out what's going on. I don't think it's difficult to incorporate STEAM into your art curriculum. I think it's out there. I think it's just a matter of finding out what other classrooms are doing, and then try to bring that in and expand on that. There's simple things like when you're teaching color theory, and start looking at the interior of the eye and the rods and the cones and color wavelengths and little things like that make that science connection. But a lot of it is just communicate with others in the building and find out if they want to try something, and there's many opportunities for it.
Yeah. And I would just add to that. I mean, I think, when you mentioned you're doing the thing with the tennis ball sleeves, and I think that's what I love so much about your curriculum. You're willing to ditch what you've done and try new things. And that to me would be the biggest thing, is just embrace change and embrace that your projects aren't going to look like they used to. And that's okay. And the learning might be really, really different and even better than what you did before.
Yes, both for the student and the teacher.
Yeah.
I mean, I've learned so many things by trying new projects. Things that were at the end of it, I'll say, well, I'm never doing that again. Yeah. But you learn something along the way. You learn some of the materials that didn't quite work out with students, and you learn some things that, wow, I didn't expect them to take it in this direction. So I think that's just that's a good quality for any art teacher. It's just to be flexible and be willing to try and change things. Almost, every quarter or every semester, just change something up and try it.
Yeah. Well, hey man, thanks a lot for the great ideas, and I look forward to seeing you again pretty soon here.
Okay, that sounds good, Andrew.
All right, see you, Ryan.
Thank you.
Oh, what an awesome guest. I just love catching up with that guy. The last time I actually caught up with Ryan was at an architectural design challenge that we both had high school students at. Our students, both Ryan's and mine, had used Google SketchUp and Chief Architect to design some architectural spaces and then use a 3D printer to print off a model. It was a fun and concrete way to see how two art teachers were embracing technology and engineering and creativity to give our students learning opportunities that an art curriculum that maybe had yet to figure out how to embrace STEAM and PBL might not have been able to provide. So embrace the tech, embrace the shift to design. It's not an either-or thing, though, and your art curriculum won't suffer. If anything, embracing STEAM and PBL will attract more students that had previously self-labeled themselves as not being too artsy into investigating your art classes. In closing, there's this great article out there floating around on the internet by the great Danny Gregory about getting rid of art education. Now, don't let that title fool you. It's really about creating an environment and a curriculum that's less capital A art-centric and more creativity-focused. And for many of us art teachers out there, STEAM and PBL are a great natural way to do that. It was such a great article that I think I'm going to have Tim on next week to discuss the future of art education. Art Ed Radio is developed, produced, and supported by the Art of Education with audio engineering by Michael Crocker. If you want to support the show and enjoy what we're doing, please subscribe on iTunes, leave some comments, write a review. That really does help us reach even more awesome listeners, and you guys are awesome. We especially enjoy those 5-star reviews that we've been getting and all the new subscriptions we've been getting. New episodes of Art Ed Radio will be released every Tuesday, and additional content can be found under the podcast tab on theartofed.com. All right, guys, thanks for listening.